Anyone who's watching this video. Today we are going to present our second task about neurolinguistics. We are Paula Fuentes and Felipe Araya, and this is the review. First, in order to contextualize our presentation, we'll go to the context of the class on the first part, then the problematic situation that we will study, the importance of the brain, emotions, and motivation for performing and learning in order to further our thesis for proposal, the difference between acquiring and learning, that is really important for the final part, and at the end, the proposal that is to motivate the students, and I will explain further enough at the long of this presentation.
Okay, obviously the first part is to contextualize the school that we are attending, or in this case I'm attending. That is Liceo Industrial Domingo Mate Pérez, located in Maipú. It has a really high level of vulnerability, 74%. It's a technical high school that has two specialties, and this is very important for the analysis because the specialties is art chemistry and car mechanics. And so there is no a really important focus on English. That is important for the analysis. It has like 30 students per class, but that can really vary. Yes. Varies between 15 students to 40. But the class that we are analyzing, it has 32 students. Well, this class is a ninth grade. It's the primero C, first C. The thing with this class is that it has, well, the school itself has two English teachers. The one that imparts classes in this class, she only imparts classes in English, not in Spanish. She has been told that she could do classes in Spanish first in order to have a basis for implement English afterwards. But the problem with this class is that the teacher only want to do classes in English. These students, most of them come from very different schools, and they didn't have classes in Spanish before, most of them. And the ones that did have classes, they did what most of the schools in Chile do. That is, classes mostly about learning grammar or formulas, yeah, grammatical stuff.
Grammar structure.
But they are not really acquiring the language, the second language. And also, because of this, they lack a lot of motivation to study, to participate in class, to have like a motivation to really learn another language, because they are more interested obviously in the technical aspects, that is chemistry and car mechanics.
Okay, so in order to explain our thesis, we have to say that the limbic system, amygdala, is a system that engages on the emotional state of the students, and the survival mode, that is, comes from stressing environments and situations, can block the information that comes through them, and as it follows, it will make it harder to learn. However, we must notice that, and in other studies that we also compare to this one, is said that the survival mode can be used to enhance the attention they have to the activity they are doing. How so? Basically, by being aware that you are being under pressure, you can mentalize on the activity that will you do at the following example. And this situation can be used to an advantage to keep the brain active and to not less their focus on what is being told.
Yeah, the importance is that the amygdala, located in the limbic system, is the one that routes information based on the emotional state. So we are going to, in a certain way, work with the emotional state of the students in order to motivate them in two different ways that we are going to explain later. Also, Krashen, that is the most important author that we are using, or one of the most important, says that, well, according to a lot of theorists, L2 is really different to L1, learning one or another, and said that, for example, for kids, it's easier to learn, to acquire a language, in this case the mother tongue, in our case Spanish, but for adults, it's only like a matter of learning another language. But he said, Stephen Krashen, that actually with enough motivation, with enough with a good teaching, for saying in a way, you can really acquire another language as well, or almost as well as the mother tongue. For that, also it should have a basis on Spanish first. Well, that's what I was saying, the difference between language acquisition and language learning in most of the Chilean schools is a matter of learning, grammatical rules, the verb to be, for example, stuff like that. But they are not really acquiring a language. And for that, in this particular school, what even the students themselves propose is that they have classes in Spanish first, and then with that basis they can grow and beyond the critical age that is supposed for some theories, and acquire the second language. For that, it's really important to have motivation, because these students are not motivated to study or to participate in classes.
Okay, for the motivation part, we have to recognize three neurotransmitters that play a fundamental part on how the brain works. First one is dopamine, which is the reward-driven behavior. When a student receives some kind of prize for their good efforts, they will show an extremely good behavior for the next activity. And this has been proven on different studies that will come further on the next slide. As well as the serotonin, which is relieves worrying and give purpose to many activities. This neurotransmitter can be used in both ways. By using activities that relaxes the student, we can ensure that they feel comfortable in the class. However, abusing of this neurotransmitter will end up in using the brain to this relaxing environment, which is bad in the case that they will feel bored and will not be as engaged as they will first when they were presented to this new emotion, new feeling. That's why we cannot only say that we must stay with the classroom only in comfortable aspects, but to defy that notion, and to keep the brain doing activity, to keep a challenge with one another, and to give more complex situations to it, so we can analyze further without only relying on the previous knowledge that they already acquired.
That's why we are focusing on two different activities, for saying in a way, during the class. For example, these two authors, Ganoshak and Tiller, they prove that with the first area or first aspect that my classmate was saying, that with competition activities, for example, that release dopamine and makes them feel less anxious, and with believing in themselves, that is like to have confidence in themselves and like make them believe that they can really acquire another language, they can be more motivated and learn or acquire more knowledge in this case.
Okay, the effects of negativity, of error negativity in the brain is basically a study that we use for this case that says that there was an experiment based only on speech in this case that used several people to recognize different sounds depending on the categories of said word, for example, synonyms and antonyms, and words that were not related to each other at all. It was shown in that study that the words that were similar to one another had more errors than the words that weren't similar at all. Why does this happen? Basically, the brain got used to the same method on the words that were on the same category, while the ones that were different and challenging keep the brain going on a strike to achieve further goals. And that is not only the only case in that study, but the ones that were more difficult had a reward at the end. So they weren't worried to fail on the ones that were easier, but they were aware of the errors that were making in the study, while the ones that were more complex. Because of that, we can say that reinforcing type of activities that engage with different prizes at the end of the, say, the cycle, we can ensure that the students will be further to go and complete say task with no problem at the end, and that for the relaxing and more child activities, they can interact with other students and to ask them and to even use it as a hint to further their intelligence when they come to complex activities. As I said here, learning activity is not completely a negative feeling that it can be used to. It can be used as a tool for a student to make them aware of their own errors. And that, as I said before, that will ensure that if a certain activity may have consequences, positive or negative, they will not lose the interest as quickly as if they didn't have any type of input from the outside. And as I said before, the mechanism produced for that is not only goes to neurotransmitter, but of their perception of the activity itself.
That's why our proposal is focused on those two aspects. For once is that they are in a relaxed environment, for saying in a way, in order to release dopamine, it makes them feel less anxious, but then focuses more on competition activity, for example, that makes them more like motivated, and like, for example, correct them their own errors and stuff like my classmates was saying before. And also motivation, that they have to be confident that they can learn too. It's not only that you are old enough for learning a language, you can also do it even if you are old, for saying away. Well, the activities that produce this motivation release some neurotransmitters and hormones. Activate some neurotransmitters and release hormones that help motivation. And that's why we are proposing competition tasks, teamwork, positive reinforcement, for example, categories of other games that really challenge them in English, but also with a basis in Spanish, to use it like an introduction for learning English. And give rewards. That's very important for them because it releases serotonin that makes them feel happy.
What we use for an example of this type of activity, since this is really vague on the explanation, is, for example, use Spanish as to give hints for the next activity that will be focused only on English. For example, if they are doing some kind of codifying a text that they need to read out loud, they may have certain words that are difficult done in a previous activity where they have to translate and maybe use it in other contexts within Spanish, so they can relate the context of the text that they will read later with what they saw before. That way you don't just discard Spanish as a whole, but use it to understand. The same with connecting it with things that happen in the country that can be read in Spanish as well. So it's not about separating those two languages, but to understand how both of them can be related and how both of them can be interconnected on our society.
Well, those are our reference, the main authors that we use, Ganachak and Taylor or Krashen, and well, that will be our presentation. I hope that you really like it.
Thank you very much.